This training video will cover the settings portion of the iSite contract management portal. The settings functionality within iSite allows you to configure your iSite portal to meet specific needs for your contract instance or for your program office. To access the settings within iSite, you'll navigate to the admin menu on the utility bar and then choose settings. It's important to note that the settings menu will only be available to users with appropriate permissions. If you don't see the settings menu option, then you'll need to contact your system administrator to give the proper permissions to access settings within iSite. So listed here on the settings page are all of the available settings for this specific license. If you have certain modules disabled or turned off within iSite, then there may be certain settings options here that aren't presented to you. So only the settings options that you have access to will be able to be configured through this screen here. So each of the settings options that you have has a title and description. Should be very self-explanatory which each of these settings are. So let's go ahead and start digging into these settings one at a time. For agency settings, we'll basically be showing you the settings that relate to the specific government agency that your contract is affiliated with. So for this demo contract, I'm showing the settings for NASA. So this is a NASA contract, and let's go ahead and look at the settings that are associated with this NASA contract. So for NASA, the one main function that we provide for NASA contracts is the NASA Form 533. So clicking on this will allow me to get into the 533 settings. Okay, so going down the list here, this is the display settings for the 533. The role to display for task 533s. What will be presented here to you are the task-specific roles that you have already defined in your iSite portal. And if you are displaying 533s to the task level, then you have the option to display the associated role and person assigned to that role within that 533 display. You also have the ability to display the 533 in dollars and cents or dollars based on the format you choose here. Within the header of the 533, you'll see some information that's listed here, including the contract number, the contract name, the latest contract mod or revision, what type of contract are we dealing with here, and there's a list of options that you have available to you, the scope of work for this contract, the address of the customer, so that would be the NASA customer address that you list here, the name of the contractor, the address of the contractor, and then of course the authorized contractor representative, which would be a fill-in field that you would enter here. All this information in the header settings function will control what's displayed in the header section of your 533 via the viewer or the Excel export. And those functions can be found in our iSite Financials training video. Okay, let's move to the next set settings, which is contract settings. Now you'll see information very similar to what we just saw in the 533 settings because they borrow from the same setting. So I can change that in either place. But again, the contract number is displayed, the name of the contract. I can give it an abbreviation, a short name. Again, we're showing the latest mod number, type of contract, scope of work, and customer address. On the contractor tab, we're showing information relating to the current contractor here. So I can display all this information here. And then these are the contract roles that have been defined and assigned for this specific contract. So we've set up 3 different roles: contracting officer, resource sales, and program manager, and we've assigned people to them. If I want to change the assignments, I simply click the icon out to the right here. You'll see a dialog. I can go ahead and choose a person to take that role. Let's go ahead and unselect this person here and then hit save. And then those contract settings will be saved for me. Okay. Next setting has to do with the data warehouse. So the data warehouse is essentially your database that stores all the information relating to your iSite contract. So every iSite contract has their own database. Your data does not commingle with any other data within iSite. So you can configure your data warehouse to fit the needs of your specific contract. So let's go across the top here. So we have a dictionary tab. So the dictionary tab allows us to name certain generic elements within iSite here. So on the dictionary tab, we have other tabs included here, including the actuals, employee labor rates, financial month groups, and so forth. And we'll go through each one of these. So for the actuals tab, you can store up to 10 different custom values when you're sending actuals over to iSite. When you're sending those values, you can give a name or a label to each of those custom fields as you see fit. So let's say, for example, when we're sending over actuals, I want to include division and branch and department data along with my actuals. I can go ahead and do that. So now whenever I'm referring to those custom fields, I can refer to them by their label rather than just custom field 1, custom field 2, and so on. Employee labor rates. So you have the ability to store up to 5 different labor rates for every employee. They are stored generically as labor rate 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. However, I want to give those names that make sense to my estimators, so I can call them whatever I want. I've chosen to call them regular, overtime, and double time here. Any labor rate that I'm not using, I can just leave blank and iSite will act accordingly. If I don't have values here, then when I'm in my estimating tool, I won't be able to see I won't have a column called labor rate 4 and it's empty. It's just going to assume that if I'm not giving it a label, then I'm not storing any values in there. Financial month groups. So when we're setting up our financial months, which we'll show you in another video, I have the ability to assign group values to each of those months. And I can assign those group values different labels. So what I can do here is I can say anything that is written into the financial month group 1 label, let's refer to those as a word fee period. Okay, so I have up to 5 different choices I can use here. This will be used in our estimating area. So when I am displaying different types of date ranges, by default I can choose contract year or by calendar year or government fiscal year. Well, I can choose up to 5 different custom groups as well. So another grouping that I will see is called award fee period because that's what I have defined here. Funding. I have the ability again to store up to 5 different pieces of information relating to funding when I'm publishing data. So if I had set up custom fields for funding, then I could choose to associate those custom fields with these labels here. So what would that mean? That would mean when I am publishing my funding packages, any data that I put in the associated custom attribute within my funding package would then be published to our funding table, so I could report off of that if I need to. Seeing that I don't have any custom attributes created here, I won't be able to select any. But anytime I've created a custom attribute that applies to funding packages, I would be able to assign those to one of these 5 custom fields. Labor class rates work just like the employee labor rates. Same thing for labor subclass rates. I can store up to 5 different rates for each of those values. I can give them names. Anything that I'm not using, I would leave blank um, and then iSite will only display the ones that I've given labels for. For subtasks, I can store custom values for subtasks as well if I need to. Same thing for tasks. I can store up to 5 different fields for tasks, and I can have up to 10 different statuses in addition to the statuses that iSite provides in iSite. So if I want to use custom status fields other than draft, in performance, closed, etc., I can go ahead and define those here. And then lastly, I can give a description of how I want to refer to a task or a subtask or a revision in iSite. So by default, tasks, revisions, and subtasks are labeled accordingly: task, rev, and subtask. I may want to change that to fit the monikers that are used on my contract. Some folks use the words TDN. Some folks use C order to represent a task. It's really up to you on what you want to call those. Whatever you change here, anywhere where you see the word task in iSite, it will use whatever you put for that label here. On the FTP import settings for the data warehouse, this gives me some settings to control what happens when I send data to our secure FTP site. So what this is saying is once data is uploaded to my secure FTP site, go ahead and send the results of those uploads to the following email address here. The suppress validation function basically says, do I want to run the records through a validation process or not? We highly recommend that you do. So if you leave that to no, then it will not suppress that validation. It will actually validate all of your records for accuracy. It will also perform related records validation. What does that mean? So up here where we had just regular validation, where if we expect a number and you send a string, that will fail. Here, what related records validation is if you send a task code to iSite, let's just say in your actuals, and that task code doesn't exist in a related table called tasks, then that file will fail, and the result of that failure will be sent to whoever is specified here under the email. So we normally suggest that you keep that set to yes. Here's a option. Do we want to suppress valid results emails? Meaning, if I sent a file up to iSite and everything was valid and imported successfully, do I still want to be emailed for that? If I suppress it, if I say yes, I want to suppress it, then I will no longer receive those emails when I successfully upload files. So I'll send the file, and then if I don't hear anything, I can assume that the file was uploaded successfully. Do I also want to include iSite support in the results? Typically, we would do that right at the beginning when we're setting up your contract. Once we understand that your IT folks know what the valid file formats are, and we have successfully sent files to your secure FTP site, we usually turn that off. We no longer need to be part of that notification process. Okay, moving on. Estimating module. So what you see here are the settings for estimating. The enabled estimate types, those are all of the available estimate types that iSite supports today. So we support an original baseline plan, a rebaseline, revision, forecasts, plan contract values, and an estimate mockup. I can turn on or off any of these. If I don't want to do plan contract values or estimates to complete, I can simply turn those off, and then when I'm creating an estimate, those options won't be available to me. This indicates whether or not I want estimate functionality to include attachments, where that means I can upload documents right along with my estimate, rather than keeping them on a file share somewhere or on my desktop. I can include them right with my estimate, which will allow other folks to see those attachments as well. So here's some creation settings. Use the smart naming function. If I have that turned on, then iSite will give you a default name based on some of the settings you have selected during your creation process. If not, it'll just leave that field blank and you can give the estimate whatever name you wish. Of course, you can certainly override that and ignore the suggestion from iSite. It's just saving you some time by keeping that turned on. So we suggest that you keep that set to yes. Do we want to allow a new estimate to be created that contains all subtasks? Normally, you would do this. There may be some instances where you don't really care to estimate to the subtask level because you may have thousands upon thousands of subtasks. So what that would mean, let's just say I have 5,000 subtasks on my task. That means when I'm creating a new estimate, it's going to create an estimate with 5,000 tabs on it. That would really be a scenario you wouldn't want to create an estimate like that, because you're not really effectively estimating down to that lower level. You're just capturing costs there. So in those instances, you'd set that to no. Do I want to allow an estimate where I don't specify any subtasks at all? I might want to do that, and if I do, what do I want to call my placeholder? I'll just call it plan. I can call it whatever I want here. The default value is plan. So when you create your estimate, you're saying, hey, I don't want to specify subtasks. I don't care. It still has to have a representative placeholder. It's just going to call that thing plan. Entry settings, enabling historic estimate entry. So by default, when I'm using the estimating tool, iSite is not going to allow me to enter labor or ODCs for months that have already occurred. Typically, plans are go forward, forecasts are go forward functions. There is not normally a reason to enter or back enter data. Only reason why I may want that is if I have purchased iSite for my contract and my contract is already in progress and I want to backfill information in iSite by using the iSite entry tools. That's the reason why I would want to enable historic estimate entry. If I turn that off, then when I'm in my entry fields, you'll just see any historical financial months listed as labels rather than text boxes. When I'm entering by FTE, how do I want to calculate those FTEs? Do I want to use working days or do I want to use productive days? You can have two different settings in your financial month calendar. You're going to choose how you represent what an FTE consists of in your estimating. Do I want to allow negative values? Typically you don't. There are some fringe cases that need that, which is why this function is here, but the recommended setting for iSite would be no. And also, do I want to allow a rebaseline if published revisions already exist? Again, rebaselining your task is a very severe step to take. When you're doing that, you're basically wiping out your original plans and replacing it with this new master baseline. Typically, you don't want to do that. However, there are fringe cases, again, that have requested that. That's why you have that function listed here. The default value is no, and that's the recommended value. In our estimating display, I can display by dollars and cents, or I can round to the dollar if I want to. Do I want to show my financial month dates in my estimating display? Yes or no. Do I want to show productive or working days, productive or working hours? All of that stuff controls my display. Do I want to, or on my historical data display, what do I want the default to be? Typically, you want it to be set to none. Just speeds up the loading of those estimates. However, I can go ahead and set that to actuals or baseline plans if I want. And then what do I want to be my default date range when I'm displaying my estimates? Contract year is the recommended value, but I can select one of the 4 predefined values and then up to 5 different custom financial month groups, which we talked about a little earlier. For the workflows, do I want to enable built-in workflows for estimating? What does that mean? When I create estimates today, if I have the built-in workflows turned on, then what I would do is I would submit for approval. It would go through a review process. Once the estimate is reviewed, then it would go through a publishing process. If I turn that off, then once I submit an estimate, it's considered approved, and then it's waiting for publishing at that point. Do I want to automatically publish estimates after they're approved? So to save yourself a step, once I approve the estimate, you can have it set so that it's automatically published upon approval. Again, if you want a more formalized process, assuming your workflows are turned on, then you would leave that set to no. That way, once it's approved, it still sits in a queue. It's not official yet until it's published. And then what would my default numeric format be for publishing? Do I want to publish to dollars and cents, or do I want to round up and publish to dollars? My dictionary, we talked about the data warehouse dictionary, but here's another place that I can access the same information. It changes the value as if I was in the other data warehouse settings page. This is just another convenient place for me to access this if I want to. Okay, moving on, financials module settings. First thing we see here is general settings. We have this disclaimer text. This disclaimer text can be printed on the bottom of our financial reporting pages. So if somebody is displaying something or if somebody is printing something, you could print text here, such as the data is sensitive or any kind of text that you want to display when you're viewing the financial section within iSite. What query group do we want to use to specify a task total? So when we're showing the task summaries page in iSite Financials, you're seeing your tasks and then you're seeing total costs for those tasks. What a query group is it allows you to select a series of account codes and group them together to create a total. So what you're specifying here is what are the account codes that represent total cost for my task in iSite. You would save that as a query group, and then here is where you're specifying that query group that you want to use to represent your task cost totals. In our variance display, what do we want to specify as our threshold for a variance alert? Plus or minus X% and or plus or minus a dollar amount. This is what will be used to control what is considered in or out of variance within iSite. Do we want to turn on profitability reporting? Yes or no? If we do that, then you'll be able to expose additional profit columns in financials. Very useful for a time and materials contract. If you're not on time and materials contract, it's not much use for you here. But basically, profitability will show you the difference between the bill rate of a labor class and the actual rate that is charged for the employee who performed the labor. Do we want to show an indicator for financial months that aren't closed? So data in iSite is live. During the month, you have the ability to send actuals data anytime you want. But it might be nice to show a message to the user saying, hey, this month is not closed yet, so these costs may change. They're not finalized. Once the financial month is closed, I can go ahead and mark it as closed, and now that indicator won't be displayed any longer. So this basically allows you to control whether or not you want to show a message to the user saying that the financial month that they're looking at is still open. In our cost reports, we have the ability to show pending transactions. These are the 4 different types of pending transactions that we can display. You can learn more about that topic in the iSite Financials training videos. On the funding display, do we want to enable funding reporting? Some contracts don't track funding down to the task level. Therefore, it doesn't make much sense to show task level funding information in our cost reports. They'll basically just be seeing a bunch of zeros. So if I want to turn that off, I can set that value to no, and that'll be turned off here. What's considered a critical and a warning threshold for funding? I can set that to any number I want here. For here, critical is if I have 30 days or less. Warning is if I have 60 days or less, well, 60 to 31. And then how am I basing my funding? Am I basing it on actuals, or am I basing it on invoice dollars? That's just a different way to capture the funding availability. And then on my drill downs, I do have the ability to enable drill down capabilities within our cost reports. Do I want to allow drill down on labor dollars? Yes or no? When I am drilling down on labor dollars, I can give a column title for labor dollars, whatever I'm choosing. So if I'm choosing employee name, that's the title of the column. What am I going to choose for labor hours? What about ODC dollars? What field am I using to represent the comments that I'm showing in my drill down? So I can show a comment, I can show employee code, vendor code, PO number, so forth, and then give it a title. All right, funding module, the module itself. This controls all of the functionality within the funding module. So enabling funding requests, yes or no. Some folks don't have a need to have an official request process as part of their funding workflows, so you can turn that on or off. If it's turned off, then you'll start out in iSite by creating a funding action. And you can learn more about the funding topics by viewing the funding video for training. These are the different funding package types that we have. So we have an amendment, a revision, and a deobligation. I can change those. I can enable those or disable those. I have to have at least one. Typically, amendment and deobligation are the ones that are selected, but you can select all three if you want. So for our fund source codes, what is the entry method for those? So you can let iSite keep track of a counter for fund source codes if you want. So if the fund source code doesn't mean anything to you and you just wanted to have iSite just have an auto incrementer, you can do that. Otherwise, you can set that to manual entry, and then you will be required to provide a fund source code every time you add one to your estimates. Do we want to allow the funding action date to be entered? Yes or no? If you say yes, that allows you to back enter the funding action date. If you say no, then when the funding action is created, that is the date that is stamped for the funding action date. Do we want to allow that funding action date entry in workflows? Yes or no? Again, that just controls the same property, but this is within the task order request workflows environment. The funding amount entry, do we want dollars and cents or dollars only? Pretty self-explanatory. Do we want to allow the editing of fund source field values, not amounts, during review? So this gives me the ability to enter or modify the funding WBS, the cost center, things along that line. I'm not changing amounts, but perhaps somebody mistakenly put a wrong WBS number or whatnot, and I want to change that. Rather than rejecting it back, I can go ahead and just modify that value during the review process if this is enabled. If it's not enabled, then the only way I can change it is to reject it. Then we say our funding actions, do they require approval or not? If they don't require approval, then as soon as they're submitted, they're considered approved. Otherwise, they will go through a formal review process. Do we want to automatically publish funding actions after they're approved? If that's set to yes, then once a funding action is approved, then it'll automatically be published. If I have funding actions require approval set to no and automatically published set to yes, then as soon as the funding action is submitted, it's considered approved and published, and I can't change it anymore at that point. The suggested settings for those is yes to require approval and no to not automatically publish. And then do we want to use a funding obligation process? What does that mean? So we have a third portion of the process which government customers can get involved with that allows them to assign PR and PO information to these funding actions. So it's not enough to just track the amount, but I may also want to track my PO and PR information. In order to do that, I would turn on this funding obligation process here. So for funding transfers, you see the funding transfer options down here. What roles are to be notified when a funding transfer occurs? So if I'm performing a funding transfer, once it's finished, I can select one of the following roles, one or more of the following roles here, who will receive an email notification saying that a funding transfer occurred. That's optional, it's not required. Field values. Okay, so for our fund source code, if I have selected manual entry, then my fund source code here, this allows me to specify how I want that fund source code to be structured. If it's set to increment, auto increment, these settings will have no effect. So now if we're asking, well, what my regex expression is, my help text, my sample text, to learn about regular expressions, I encourage you to Google regular expressions online. But basically, regular expressions allows you to specify a format for entry of a string. So if I want to say, the fund source code must start with the letters A, B, and C, it has to be 6 characters in length, and it must end in a 2-digit number. I can create a regular expression for that fund source code, paste it in here, and then when I am entering my funding action and I'm adding a fund source code, it will force me to follow that format. The help text that is displayed here is basically a message that is displayed to the user indicating the format that you require. And then the sample text allows you to provide sample formats that would pass or would conform to the required fund source code format that you're looking for. For cost center and for fund field, you have the ability to just allow straight text entry. And if you do that, basically whatever they type in is what the value is. Otherwise, you can conform to a list of values. So basically, they'll be presented with a list that they can choose from. If you use the specified values, you're just going to provide each cost center on one line here, and then these will be the values that they could choose from a drop-down menu. Otherwise, they could just hand enter. If you have cost center values that you can provide, it's suggested that you provide them. It just saves issues for transposing numbers or invalid entries or whatnot. Same thing applies for the fund field in my funding action. I can allow text entry, or I can provide a list of values that they can choose from there. Lastly, some dictionary items here. Again, very similar to what we saw in the data warehouse area. If I had created any custom fields in iSite and tied them to funding packages, then I could associate those custom attributes with the custom fields when this data is published into the reporting tables. Okay, moving along, milestones. Pretty basic settings for milestones, whether or not milestones will require approval or not, and whether or not task discussions are created by comments when I am reviewing my milestones. That's pretty much it for the milestone settings. Portal settings. This has to do with the general functionality within iSite. On the general settings page, I can give my iSite portal a name and description. I can include information in the page footer HTML, which means I can include text that will appear in the footer along with the standard footer that appears here. So it might be useful if you want to include a contact address or whatever information you want to display. You can specify here in this page footer section. What's the standard time zone for your iSite instance. This is just generic. This can be obviously overridden at the user level, but this is just the generic time zone. Do we want to enable security trimming on menus? Normally that's set to yes. What does that mean? That means if I don't have access to certain menu options, then I won't see those menu options. If that's set to no, then if I don't have access to contract management financials, I'll still see the menu option, but when I try to click on it, it'll send me a message saying, sorry, you don't have access. Contact your system administrator to get access. We typically just say, leave that to yes. That way, if somebody doesn't have access to something, they won't see those menu options available to them. Next, we have the maximum number of help documents to display. So help documents are displayed up in the upper right-hand corner here. In this section here, I can display up to this number of documents in this menu here. If there's any more than that, then I can see all of them by clicking this button. A little dialog will appear, and then a paged list of items will display that show all of my help documents. iSite Essentials. These are functions within the iSite Essentials module that you can turn on or off. So if you don't have a need for document libraries or announcements or anything here, you can go ahead and turn those functions off. Authentication. If we had enabled SharePoint integration or single sign-on integration via security, then this is where I would be setting those settings here. So for my SharePoint integration, yes, do I want to enable it? Okay. Do I want to force all users to authenticate through SharePoint? Yes or no. Here, what is the URL that I'm using? SharePoint enabled URL to access iSite. What about the URL that would be listed in emails? This message expiration basically keeps a sync between our servers and SharePoint. Typically just leave that as 5 as the default. And if you want to include IP restrictions, Internet Protocol restrictions, you would put the IP addresses here. And that would mean that only folks from those IP addresses would be able to access iSite via SharePoint. That's not typically used, but there are fringe cases where that's requested. If I'm using single sign-on, do I want to force all users to authenticate through SSO or not? Yes or no. Pretty standard there. Email. I do have the ability to control how emails are handled within iSite. These typically aren't changed, but sometimes during phase-in, we'll change these. Right now, I have all of the emails set to forward to a specific email. So any email that is being generated out of iSite is now being forwarded to the following address. Typically, you're going to want to leave that setting as deliver all emails as specified. But I can choose to forward the emails, or I can choose to suppress them all, which means if iSite wants to create an email, it just simply won't. It'll just ignore that option. But the recommended option is deliver all emails as specified. And then what would be the default URL that's listed in emails to be able to access iSite? That is what you would list here. The support tab, this basically allows you to display a message anytime somebody clicks on the help support link here. So when I click on that, you'll notice it's going to say test help desk message there. That basically just allows me to control whatever I want to display in that support screen when I log on there. And you see there's basic formatting. I can do bold, italics, underlining, and so forth. Custom values, I do have the ability to override and use different values for certain objects within iSite. Right now we only support document libraries. The default values for document libraries objects are draft, final, and ready for review. If I want, I can override those and give my own status codes and use those instead. And then web services. If you are taking advantage of iSite web services, you can choose to enable or disable those here. When doing so, you will create a username and password that will be used for your instance to access those web services. You control it. whatever is specified here for user ID and password is what will be needed for you when you are communicating with the web services and able to um, request information. Moving right along, risk management settings. Not much here, but we'll go through them. Do we want to require approval for risks? Yes or no. Do we want to automatically publish risks after approval? Yes or no. When during the approval process, if a comment is created, do we want to start a task discussion thread? We can say yes or no there. The heat map, this is kind of cool. This allows you to customize your heat map within iSite. So you have up to 5 different colors that you can specify here. So if I want to say very low is blue or green or yellow or none even, I don't necessarily want colors for very low or very high. I can do that. So what I can do is change my heat map here, and let's just say that's high and that's low. For one, I can change any of these colors here for any of these values to whatever colors are listed here. Let's go ahead and change that back to blue, as you see, very low. And then schedules. If I want to create a schedule, what does this mean? This basically allows me to create recurring schedules for notification for risks. So if I want to say, hey, I want all of my risks to be reviewed every 45 days, I can create a schedule here that specifies this. So let's just say I call this every 45 days. And then we'll say this occurs daily every 45 days. Create that schedule. Now, what that means is when I am working in the risk module, I can choose this schedule for notifications. So it's just set up automatically, and then every 45 days there will be a reminder sent out to the owners of the risks to update their risks with new activity. Security settings. This really only, or mostly only applies to customers that are using the iSite authentication module. So if you're using single sign-on or if you are using SharePoint authentication, the passwords function won't matter to you. But there is the ability to show a logon warning when folks log on to your site. You can enable that or disable that here. If it's enabled, you can type in some text here, so when your users log on, they won't be able to use the system until they read this message and hit OK. If this is turned off, then they would not see a message. For the password settings, again, this is only if you're using iSite passwords for your security. Basically self-explanatory. What I want my passwords to consist of: number of uppercase letters, lowercase letters, special characters, and so forth. What is my maximum age? What's the maximum number of passwords that I can store without reusing them? How many failed attempts would I allow at any one point in time? That means if I've failed 3 different times, it'll lock my account out automatically, and then an administrator would have to go in and unlock my account. If I want to ban words, I can go ahead and ban them here. So if I wanted the word iSite or password or golf, I can go ahead and specify words that can't be included as part of their password if I wanted to. Okay, task management settings. Really not much to show here. The only setting we have is in our task list. Do we want to show a task role when we're showing the list of tasks? If I choose none, then I won't display a task role. Otherwise, I will be able to select one of the roles that have already been defined in the system. So if I choose task manager, then whoever's assigned to this task manager for each role will be displayed in a column in the task management area. Task order request workflow settings. These are the options available for that. Do we want to allow task order admins to change data at any step? You can turn that on or off. That basically allows your task admins to go in and complete task order activities and so forth. Do we want to show time to complete status in our task order request lists? The time to complete functionality would be covered in our task order request workflows training video, but this just controls whether or not that information is displayed in the task order request lists themselves. Do I want to highlight the current activity tab? Yes or no? Do I want to flash an icon in the current activity tab? What does that mean? So when I'm a user, basically they're just visual cues. When I'm a user and I am responsible for the current activity within a workflow, it'll highlight the current activity tab and it'll even flash a little icon on there. Again, just to try to draw the attention to the user that they have something to do. Do we want to allow only one open revision per task? Typically that's a no. Actually, typically that's a yes. In this instance, we have it set to no. You normally wouldn't have more than one open revision at a time, but there are certain cases where you may want that. So this allows you to set that here. And then do we want to auto create a title based on the settings you've chosen during the task order creation? Yes or no? Pretty self-explanatory. For numbering, we can do a couple different things here. I can assign a counter in iSite to do my numbering for me. So what that means is iSite will just keep an auto incremented number, and it will go ahead and display that number for me every time I create a new task. Otherwise, I can use some of these functions here. So if I want to format my auto numbering display, I can do that here. I can describe a format that I want to display. Here I can provide regular expression functionality. We talked about that earlier in the video. Again, if you're familiar with regular expressions, you can enter those regular expressions to dictate how those task order numbers are to be entered, if they're entered manually or not. Do I want to prefix any of these values with anything? What is the format for display, and so forth. And then on cloning, these are the options I have for cloning a task order request. So I can clone it from the task, I can clone it from the previous task order request if I want to, or both. And do I want to allow a blank option for revision workflows? Meaning, do I want to just start fresh and not bring anything over as guidance for a revision? Yes or no? Typically, that would be no, but there are again fringe cases that allow for that. All right, timekeeping module settings. A lot to this one. Approval workflows. This allows me to create one or more workflows that I can then assign to users for approvals when they submit their timesheets. So to create a new approval workflow, I simply click the Add New Approval Workflow button, give it a name. We'll call this Supervisor. Sounds good. When I'm creating the workflow, I can create one or more steps, up to 5 of them. If I create 5 different steps, then for each step, I'm going to choose the responsible party that will be notified. So once step 1 is done, it'll fall to the next step, and then the next step, and the next step. If any of these reject, it'll go all the way back to the user who submitted the timesheet to make their corrections. When I select my steps, I can select who will be notified. I can add one or more people if I want to here. So if I go ahead and do that, or I can just select one person if I want as my approver. If I have multiple people signed here and I select this checkbox, then that means everybody who's assigned to the step must approve before it moves to the next step in the process. Once I've done that, I can then choose the users I want to assign to here. Now there are some visual cues here. I don't have, well actually I do have, any users who are highlighted in green here where it says workflow none. Those are the folks that I can select. The ones that already have workflows assigned to them are listed in yellow. So you see these two folks here are assigned the alternate workflow, it's called. So if I want to select these folks, they will be assigned. And there you go. I've created my supervisor workflow here. If I want to change my workflow at all, I can do that just by clicking on it, change the name, add steps, change responsible parties, change who it's assigned to, and so forth. Has to do with default settings within iSite for timekeeping, excuse me. So these are the entry settings you're seeing here. So for job display, I can show the name, description, or both if I want. Right here, job description is chosen. Do I want to abbreviate long job names? So if I have a really long name that's kind of unwieldy to view, I can choose to abbreviate for the beginning, middle, or end, or not abbreviate at all. Do I want to require time entry and holidays? Yes or no? Do I only want to allow job types that are marked as holiday to be entered on a holiday? Meaning, if I have a job type that's marked as a holiday, I only want to allow that job to have time entered to it on a specific holiday. I can set that yes or no here. Do I want to require comments? Yes or no. Do I want to check for early time entries? What does that mean? So when I'm checking for early time entries, basically what I'm doing is I'm limiting when somebody can enter time for the day. So I don't really want people entering 8 hours for their day at 8 o'clock in the morning. Clearly they haven't worked 8 hours yet. So if I say, hey, the earliest time that they're allowed to enter time is 4 p.m., then if they try to enter time for today and it's prior to 4 p.m., it's not going to let them. It's going to tell them that they'll have to wait till after 4 o'clock. Or I could just turn that off. Do I want to check for changed time entries? Meaning if I've entered time and then I went back and changed it, do I want to audit that and require that they put in comments, yes or no? That's important for DCAA requirements. So you can choose to enable that or not. What kind of decimal precision am I looking for time entry? 0, 1, or 2 decimal places. What are my defaults for working days and hour types? So the default working days is Monday through Friday. Hour types are regular and overtime. What does this mean? What this means is when I am setting up my users, rather than having to go select this for every user, I can just choose to select the defaults that iSite has defined for me. So if Monday through Friday is the defaults and regular and overtime is the defaults for hour types, then I don't need to go in and select any of those for each of my users. I would only need that for users that don't conform to those defaults. Saves me a lot of time in entering. My job types, I can use default job types that iSite provides, or I can override that and provide a list of my own job types if I want something that makes more sense to my contract. Okay, export settings. I have the ability to export to the following 3 systems. We can certainly add more as needed, but when I select one of these, it's going to enable a tab, and then I can essentially start mapping information relating to the export that I've selected to data that is already listed in iSite. So for instance, QuickBooks requires the following fields here. So for employee name, we're going to use a user attribute. Actually, we're going to use a user property here for employee name, and we'll choose first name and last name. For QuickBooks class, we can go ahead and use the job attribute. You see the different types of things that I can use here. Any of this stuff I can go ahead and use to specify my layout definition. So what iSite will do is once I set up this mapping and I create my QuickBooks export file, it'll use all this information to select the appropriate values and create my file so that I can import into QuickBooks. Again, if I create more than one of these, if I support more than one export, I can go ahead and have settings for each of those. All right. Holidays, very simple. These are the list of holidays that the timekeeping system supports. If I want to add a new holiday, I simply click the Add New Holiday button, give it a name, and choose the date, and then create the holiday. I can delete holidays if I want. These are just reference points. All it really does is it just highlights the calendar in a different color, and it also will lock down entry just for those holiday types. Well, actually, it'll open up those holiday job types on that date once you're on there. But I can select holidays and delete them if I want. I can even import holidays. So if I want to import holidays from an external service, I can choose the year and then I can select all of them, or I can go down the list and say, well, which holidays apply to me? So I know we don't want New Year's Day, Martin Luther King's Day, President's Day, and so forth. And then all those holidays will be imported for me. So it's just a nice way to manually bring in a bunch of holidays at once rather than having to create them one at a time using the editor. Hour types, very straightforward here. These are the different types of hours that you can collect. Regular and overtime are standard, but you might have double time, shift work, third shift, second shift, whatever. You create whatever hour types make sense to you when you're tracking time in iSite. To add a new one, I simply come in here and give it a name, give it an abbreviation, whether or not it's active or not, and then I can actually sort it as well. So if I want to put a specific hour type in a certain sort order, I can give it a different sort group. So sort all the A's first, then sort all the B's, and so forth. And this will show you the users that are assigned to the hour type. If I look at my hour types that I have here, you'll see this regular one. This is all the users that are assigned to it. I can't change it here, but if I click the Assign Users button, this will allow me to assign this hour type to users within the system. As you see, I already have all the users assigned to them. Okay, jobs. Jobs basically allow you to set the different projects or job codes that your users will be charging time to. So to add a new job, I click the Add New Job button. All the fields that you see here are very self-explanatory. I give it a name and description. What's the start and end date for this job? So what that means is the job won't appear on a timesheet until the start date has passed, and once the end date has passed, the job will fall off the timesheet automatically. So I don't necessarily have to go in and manually remove the job from timesheets if I give it a valid start and end date. I can also keep track of budgeted hours, and we do have a budgeted hours report, so we can track actual recorded hours versus the budget. I can give it a job type, and we covered where I can control that list of types earlier. Is the job active or not? So let's just say I have a valid start and end date, but if the job is marked as inactive, then regardless of the dates, that job is no longer going to appear on anybody's timesheet. Do I want to require comments for this job when this job has time charged against it or not? Yes or no? And this supersedes the setting on requiring comments on timesheets. So if I have requiring comments turned off for timesheets, but I have it turned on for specific jobs, then it'll still require comments for those specific jobs. Do I require separate project manager approval? This is a good one. If I turn this on, then what this means is whoever is assigned as the project manager here will automatically become part of the timekeeping approval process for a timesheet that is submitted that includes this job. So the nice part about it is that project manager will be notified first. They will be the first level approvers for the timesheet. They'll only be able to see the time entries related to the projects assigned to them, so they wouldn't see anything else. And it just gives project managers a heads up and gives them some approval authority over timesheets automatically. And then again, I can control the sorting of those jobs. So maybe I want to sort all of the regular billing jobs in one group, all of the PTO jobs or whatnot in another group. I can do that. If you have created extended properties for your jobs, then those would be displayed here. Otherwise, you would not see an extended properties tab. When I have a job that's already been created, I can go ahead and click into that job and I can change those values if I want. I can also assign users to this job. Now you'll notice in the toolbar the delete this job button is disabled. Why is it disabled? Well, once a job has been defined and users have charged hours against it, the job can no longer be deleted. The job can only be marked as inactive. And you want this because we don't want the jobs to be deleted, because then you would lose your historical tracking. If you were ever audited by DCAA and you had to provide information about an old timesheet, if you deleted a bunch of jobs and users, you wouldn't really be able to satisfy those audit requirements. So once time has been charged to a job, then that job can no longer be deleted. So once I'm on here, if I want to change any of these properties, I can. At this point, I can see who's assigned to this job. If I want to go ahead and assign users right from here, I can do so. It's automatically going to show everybody who's already selected up at the top. I can go ahead and add more people if I want to. Go ahead and click those and click the continue button. Then I can go ahead and assign start and end dates for these jobs if I want. By default, it's going to use the job default for the start and end date and whether or not it's active. So if the start and end date of the job is defined and it's set to a specific active point, if I just want to go with the defaults, I don't need to go through and set them all here. I'll just use whatever is the default. If I want to override that, I can go ahead and do that. So you'll notice here there's this little indicator. If I hover over it, I can say, you know what, I want to apply a different start date to these users. So let's use a start date of 4/10/2014. And then I'm going to copy it to all start dates, or I can just copy it to blank start dates. Now right now they're all the same, so let's go ahead and copy it to all. So now instead of having to manually enter in all those, it does it for me. So that's a good way I can mass change a series of users at once. Same thing for the active flag. Same thing for the end date. I can change all of that if I want to. Okay, so once I'm done with that, I save my job user assignment, and now all those jobs will be, or this job will be assigned to all these users with the effective start and end dates. But typically, you'll want to manage at the job level. This is really just for overriding in specific cases. It's not normal to want to override in bulk like this, but that is available if you need it. Okay, a couple other things. Some folks have hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of jobs. Matter of fact, we have had a customer with in excess of 100,000 jobs because they were tracking to a work order system, and they got very granular with jobs that people can track time to. So it may be hard to find a job that you need to edit. So we provide some search capabilities. So if I type some characters here, I can reduce my list down to either the title or description, anything that I find here. So that allows me to limit my list without having to page through what we have here, which is, well, we only have 2 pages of 20 items per page, 39 total. But if I had thousands and thousands of records, trying to find where this job is that I need to edit might be kind of difficult. So I can narrow it down by typing in some search criteria. I can also nail it down by only showing jobs that meet one of these following job types or job statuses as well. So is the job active or inactive? So it's just a way I can pare down this list if I need to. And that's the jobs functionality for timekeeping. We have notifications. There's 3 different types of notifications you can set up within iSite timekeeping. That would be overdue time entry, signed timesheet reminders, and overdue signed timesheets. Each of those, you can have 1 or more notifications set up, and I'll show you how to set those up now. Okay, so let's go to our overdue time entry, and what I want to do is I want to go ahead and click add a new notification. I'll give it a name, basically time daily. Description, send supervisor summary email. What does that mean? If I set that to yes, then when iSite sends out an email to users, it'll also send out an email to that user's first level approver saying that they they're overdue in their time entry. So it's a good way for the first level approvers to be aware that the folks that they approve time for are not keeping up to date with their time entry. I can specify the subject and the content of the notification. So I can say overdue time entry. That would be the email subject. I can put you are overdue in your time entry. Please sign in. Now, I can have some what we call smart tags in here. So these are the smart tags that are available. If I include these smart tags, then this will actually personalize the email a little bit. So if I want to say first name, comma, you are overdue in your time entry in the portal name system for the period ending date. So what that'll do is that'll replace those tags with dynamic information at the time the email is created. So it may say, Jim, you are overdue in your time entry in the iSite contract management portal system for the period ending February 21st, 2017. Please sign in and enter your time. So you can get real smart. These are the available smart tags that are available to you, if any of those make sense. And then I can set up a schedule. So how often do I want this to occur? Typically for an overdue time entry, I want that to occur daily. So we'll make that recurring. It reoccurs daily, every day, and we'll say that runs not at 12. Let's say that runs at 9 a.m. Let's say 8 a.m. So I can have that recur at 8 a.m. You can play with different options here. So weekly gives you different options. Monthly gives you different options as well. They're all very self-explanatory. If I want to say, hey, this is going to run every hour at a specific time, I can do that. That's kind of overkill. I can give it a start and end date. So we'll say it's going to start on 1/1/2017, and then, we'll say it runs 12/31/2020. Save it. So now I've set up the notification. Again, I can set up multiple notifications if I want. If I want additional nags to go out, it's really up to you. But these are the 3 different types of notifications you can send out within iSite. To delete a notification, I click the checkbox, click delete, and then go on from there. Okay, that does it for notifications. Last thing is timesheet periods. This basically controls the timekeeping periods that you track time into. A period is really just a beginning and end date, and we keep track of the number of hours just for statistical purposes only. I can create a period at a time if I want to. That's kind of cumbersome. Instead, I can create a range of periods. So let's just say it's a new year. I want to create the periods for 2018 or 19 or whatnot. I can say create new range of timesheet periods. These are my different options. So I can say it's a fixed number of days in each period, or I can say it's 1st through the 15th and 16th through the end of the month, or just say it's monthly. If I want, it's 1st through the end of the month. Typically, fixed number of days is the best. I'll say 1/1/2019. That's my start. and it's going to be 7 days in each period. 12/31/2019. What are the period hours? We're basically going to say it's going to be static, so every period is going to be 40 hours. But if I want to say calculate it, then I'll basically say we're going to use the number of hours per weekday. So if we're doing 1st through the 15th and 16th through the end of the month, obviously there's different number of weekdays in each of those periods, so it'll calculate the number of hours. But seeing that we're using a fixed number of days, we're going to use a fixed number of hours. And then if I click create timesheet periods, it'll create all those timesheets for 2019 all at once. So I don't have to enter all of those by hand. Okay, that's timekeeping. Almost there. Variance reporting. Very simple here. There's two different types of variance reports that we can create, contract and task level. For our settings at the contract level, this is the level of reporting that we will support. It's going to be element of cost only, but these are my choices. I can just do a summary, I can do element of cost, or I can do both. So it's a summary narrative and then a narrative at each element of cost if necessary. I picked the variance report driver that will be used to create the contract. So before doing this, I will have to create a template for my variance reports. And then here is my threshold for variance alert. You'd also see this in the the financials settings area. Plus or minus a certain percent and or plus or minus a dollar amount. Same thing for task. I choose the level of reporting that I'm going to be using and then what is considered the threshold for out of variance tasks. Okay, so I can have a different setting for each one here. The reports that are available for settings, just one of them. It's a module checklist. Basically allows me to show when I am setting up the contract at the beginning, my iSite instance at the beginning. These are all the things that I need to set up within iSite for the iSite instance to be configured properly. So if I have agency reporting and financials turned on, these are all of the items that needs to be set up. So as you see, each of these tests are passed. If there's anything that is not set up, it'll show fail, and that way you can go in and give it attention and then be able to finish the setup for that specific module. So that's pretty handy. And that pretty much covers the admin settings for iSite.